Welcome back. In the previous lessons, we learned how to use the for loop and the while loop to handle repetitive tasks. But what if you need to loop inside another loop? For example, iterating through multiple layers of data. That's where nested loops come in. In this lesson, we learn how to use loops within loops to solve complex problems efficiently. Imagine you are setting up a calendar. You need to loop through each month, and for every month, you also need to loop through the days. Nested loops allow us to handle these layered iterations seamlessly. Nested loops are loops placed inside of another loop. The inner loop executes all its iterations for each single iteration of the outer loop. This is the syntax of nested loops. We have the outer loop and we have the inner loop. For each iteration of the outer loop, the inner loop executes all its iteration. For example, let's say we want to create multiplication table 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all at once. So to do that, we can use nested loops. So we are going to have a for loop that iterates over a range of 1 to 5. So we have 1 and then we are going to stop at 6 because we want to create multiplication table 1 to 5. So the range is going to stop at 5, given 6 as the stop point. All right, so let's print a message so that we are able to identify which multiplication table we are dealing with now. So we are going to say multiplication table. Okay, so we're going to have table I. All right, this is supposed to be an F string because we are embedding a variable inside of it. So this is supposed to be I, not 1. All right, so we have multiplication table I. So if I is 1, we have multiplication table 1. When I is 2, we have multiplication table 2. When I is 3, we have multiplication table 3. All right, so inside of this loop, we are going to create another loop. So we have a for loop, so we can call this J. Okay, so we can say in range. So this range is the one that is going to generate the number of multiplication rows we want to have in our table. Okay, so let's say we want from 1 to 10. So that means we are going to stop at 11. Okay, so let's have colon. Now we are going to print. Okay, so what we are going to print, we are going to have an F string. Okay, we are going to have a curly braces. Now we have I as our first variable. So when we are dealing with multiplication table 1, okay, let's have J first. Okay, so we can say 1 times 1, 2 times 1, 3 times 1. Okay, so we are going to have this J is going to be the rows, while this one is going to be the table we are dealing with. So we can have J, then X to stand for multiplication. So we have under curly braces. This is where we are going to have I, right? So after that, we are going to have equal to. So inside of this, we are going to have an expression that performs the actual multiplication. So we are going to have J then multiplied by I. All right. So if we run this now, we're going to have a multiplication table from 1 to 5. All right. So let's see what we have. So we have multiplication table 1, 1 times 1, 2 times 1, 3 times 1. Okay, so it goes on and on like that up to 10. We have 10 times 1 to be 10. After that, we have multiplication table 2. We have 1 times 2, 2 times 2, like this, like this. Okay, so up to 5. If we want space between each of the multiplication tables, we can add a space. We can add an empty print statement after this. Okay, so let's print an empty statement. Okay, so that's going to create an empty line between each of the tables. So we have multiplication table 5 from 1 to 10. Okay, so we have table 4, right? So you see how nested loops allow us to perform this kind of iteration. So for each of these outer iteration, we are going through all this iteration. So for the first iteration here, we have 1 to be the first iteration. We perform from 1 to 10. In the second iteration, we perform from 1 to 10. In the third iteration, we perform from 1 to 10 up to the fifth iteration. We can easily change this. We can easily increase or reduce this as we like. So if we want to create from 1 to 10, now we're going to have multiplication table 1 up to multiplication table 10. We can have another example. Let's say we want to create a grid of 3 rows and 4 columns in which each of the cell indicates the row and column value. We can also use nested loop for this. Okay, So to create such a grid, we're going to have one loop, okay, let's say this is going to stand for rows. Okay, we can call this row, so not using high now. So we're going to say for row in, since we want 3 rows, so we're going to say range. All right, so we are going to have 1 and then we're going to stop at 4 because we want 3 rows. Okay, so we have our colon here. Inside of the row loop, we can first print. Let's first print let's print row and see what we have. So we are going to have from 1, 2 and 3. Okay, so this is going to be our row. Now inside of the row loop, okay, we can have another loop that is going to stand for the column. Right, so we can say for call, let's just write it fully. So for column in range, okay, since we need 4 columns, so we're going to start from 1, okay, and then we're going to stop at 5. All right, so we have for column in range. So what we want to print now, we want to print the row and the column. So let's have f string. All right, so we are going to have parentheses. It's going to be parentheses. All right, inside of the parentheses we're going to have curly braces so that we'll be able to embed our row and our column. So we have row, comma, okay, we have another parenthesis, we have row, comma, column. All right, so if we run this now, we are going to have a list of rows and columns, but this is not the result we want to achieve. We want to create a grid of 3 by 4 columns. That's 3 rows, 4 columns. Okay, so to do that, the print statement also has an additional input that you can provide. So if you over print, you have separator and then you have end. This separator is used to separate the inputs that you provide for the print statement. Possibly you are printing 2 inputs, maybe you have 2 variables, you have A and B. So this separator is what will be used to separate the input. Okay, let's see that, or let's first comment that out so that you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so let's say we have A to be equal to, let's say A is John, right? Just so you can understand the print statement more better. Let's say B is James, okay, or let's say Jane. All right, so we want to print A comma B. Okay, so the separator, if you over this now, the separator is what will be used to separate A and B when you print it. Okay, so you have the separator is the space that is in between them. So by default, the separator is a space, but if you provide any other value, that's what will be used to separate them. Okay, if I say okay, let me provide an input. So let me say separator. Let's say separator. Let me say my separator is going to be a pipe. All right. So I don't want to use space now. I want to use pipe. If I run this now, I'm going to have a pipe between John and Jane. All right. So in the same way as we have separator, we also have end. If you over it, we have another input that we can provide to our print function. So we have end. End by default is a new line character, so you have \n used to end every print statement, which is what will make it to create a new line after the text that is being printed. Okay, so in our, let's get rid of this. Okay, so in our grid that we are creating, we don't want new line because the new line is being added at the end of each print statement. So we don't want new line to be our end now. We want to use another thing as the end. So we're going to have comma. So we're going to have end. By default, the default value is new line character. So we are not going to use new line now. We're going to use an empty space. Okay. So each of the printed statements will not be on a new line. They will just continue in an horizontal form. So if I run this now, so you see now we have our grid in a single line. Okay. So this is the end that we just provided. If this is new line, that means each of these print statements will be in a new line. Okay, but we want to create 3 by 4 grid. Okay, so that means after the first row, we need this to start at a new line. So to achieve that, we are going to come after the second for loop. Okay, so and then we are going to print an empty statement. this empty statement is going to have the new line as its own end. Okay, so that is going to make this second row to start at a new line. So if we run this now, so we are going to have our 3x4 grid. This one is standing for the row, this one is standing for the column. So we have row 1, column 1, row 1, column 2, row 1, column 3, row 1, column 4. So we have row 2, column 1, row 2, column 2, row 2, column 3 up to the last cell here. So the last cell here is row 3, column 4. Nested loops can be fun to work with, but ensure that you avoid deeply nested loops where possible, as too deep nested loops can add unwarranted complexity to your code, and it also impacts the performance of your code. The more the number of nested loops you have, then the slower your program becomes. You can also add comments to explain part of your code, and while creating nested loops, run and verify the smaller loops first before adding more complexity to avoid everything mixing up. So I have a little challenge for you in the next lesson that will let you to put what you've learned into practice. I will see you there.